So, is the title shocking? First things first, is Star Trek dead? Or is it just on life support? Or is it just on pause? Because we know now, of course, that Starfleet Academy has been canceled. One more season to go next year. And then Strange New Worlds, I guess we'll get 2 more seasons. But that's it. There's no new Star Trek coming. So, you could argue that it's not exactly dead. Maybe on life support. Maybe sleeping. But for the sake of the video, what just killed Star Trek? What exactly did? Let's talk about it. So you guys give me a lot of ideas, feedback about what videos or the general gist to make. Now this one was partially due to that. I have been rewatching Star Trek Enterprise with Mr. Scott Bakula as Captain Jonathan Archer, right? And honestly, I had never really taken to the show much, and I'm finding on the rewatch, enjoying it a lot more. So, but during my kind of research, because I always like to, I don't know about you, I always like to bound back and forth to look something on, up on Google AI to say, whatever's, trending, so to speak, with that topic. And then there was an article that I guess Scott Bakula just gave an interview, or maybe it was Vintage, but they were talking about Star Trek Enterprise having too many episodes. I think it came in at 98 episodes. There was, 4 seasons. So that's 20 episodes over the old series, and that ran 3 seasons. But Scott Bakula, his sort of point was that he called it a glut. He called it too much product. And again, this is back in the day when it was on UPN. So it's an interesting point. Do you think that? I gotta say, I don't agree with Scott Bakula fully, but I understand what he's saying, meaning people start to take it for granted. That there'll always be a new Star Trek episode this week. And also you could argue the old statement, quantity over quality. You want quality, the quantity isn't always going to give that. So you might have a large, high quantity that necessarily isn't going to be quality. So what do you think? I tend to, though, also side on that Star Trek as the example. But any drama, any show that I love, I would love to have that 20, 25 episodes. I've said repeatedly in the channel, to me, 10 to maybe 15 streaming, that's if you're lucky. Sometimes it's 8 to 12. I like the old school 2025. And traditional broadcasts still, the networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, they still give us the 25, I think, between maybe 22 the lowest. So, but is Captain Archer, is Scott Bakula correct? Was it too much product too? Now that was back in the day. But look at Paramount Plus. People can criticize the shows, but there's been quite a number, right? Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Strange New Worlds, and then Starfleet Academy. They keep churning them out, and you could argue that it's sort of like a glut as well. All right, here comes the big elephant in the room, or the big, Salat, Vulcan, the big hairy toothy bear. I was watching one of the Enterprise episodes, and they showed Archer and T'Pol getting run down, chased by a huge Salat, but the elephant or the Salat in the room is, of course, Alex Kurtzman. And that's, of course, New Trek, PP Trek, Paramount Plus Trek, whatever. When Star Trek Discovery first aired, it was CBS All Access, whatever. The point is, right, the thing that's always, the elephant in the room, the nagging thing is the quality, talk about quality and quantity, the quality or lack thereof with Paramount Plus Star Trek, with New Trek, and Alex Kurtzman. The idea of, it's not 100% him, but he's in control. He's the boss. Like Gene Roddenberry, Rick Berman, Michael Piller back in the day. Jerry Taylor, Ira Bear, the showrunners. But certainly you have one big main boss, and that was always either Gene Roddenberry and then Rick Berman. When Gene passed the torch and passed, it was Rick Berman. So our Rick Berman today is Alex Kurtzman, and you can argue, as I know all you guys have, and I've been more than vocal, as a writer who wrote for Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager, I see Paramount Plus Star Trek as being just not the same. I mean, we can go through so many points, these talking points and critical elements, but it's just not the same. And then, of course, you can get into the weeds and the details, what with the retconning, or the complete refutation, turning the back on sort of the established canon. Like I was watching, rewatching Enterprise, and they had a really good episode with Klingons, and they all were, the traditional look of Klingons. And I started thinking about how Discovery, they made them like little purplish. I don't even know what they were. I don't. You guys tell me what mutations, or maybe it was a different class, a different species. Dare we say? What would Worf say? I'm not a merry man. I'm not a merry purple people eater, or whatever it was. So, but the Alex Kurtzman era, like they say, the Rick Berman era of Star Trek, or Roddenberry era back in the day in the 60s, then Rick Berman era. I always say that's also the Michael Piller era, because he was the main creative and showrunner writer, and I worked with Michael. So the bottom line is that Alex Kurtzman gave us what we have today, and and finally, and this I guess is probably the most personal, like for me and anybody, and it's also maybe the hardest to sort of put your finger on it and sort of quantify, but it's people just got tired of Star Trek. Like, how much can you watch? Even, say, MCU, Star Wars, whatever. Even other, say, sitcoms or dramas. Like, how many NCISs are there? How many Law and Orders, versions and variations? There comes a time where talk about a glut or talk about too much. And as a personal thing, a little anecdote for you guys here, this was maybe second season of Deep Space Nine. I guess I could trace it back. I was watching an episode where Chief O'Brien and Dax were in a runabout. And they were, exploring, I think it was the wormhole, whatever. And I was looking at it, and something came over me. I said, why am I watching this? I was like, I'm going to put on anything else. And this is coming from a longtime Star Trek fan, a guy who wrote for the shows, including Deep Space Nine. And I was like, I just don't want to watch this right now, And then I went back maybe a day or two later, and it's very rare. That's really the only time. But what I'm saying is that people do tire of things. You get tired. You get too used to it. A glut, a sort of always there, And so I think that's maybe another element. And that connects, of course, with what? The glut that Bakula had talked about, and having too much product, maybe. And the way Paramount Plus continues to what? Churn out shows. Oh, and then what am I saying? I'm forgetting. Lower Decks, Prodigy, the animated shows. And then, of course, here's a biggie. Here's Section 31. Section 30. How can we forget that, right? So, I really do think, of course, you have to recognize human nature. And humans can tire of things. Like a lot of people on the channel, a lot of my subs, and I agree, and I've actually made more than a few videos, let it rest. I made one about Star Wars, let Star Wars rest, let Star Trek rest. Give it 2 or 3 years. Even 1 to 2 with nothing. I don't think we're going to do, they're finishing up Starfleet Academy and Star Trek World. So what do you think? We're still getting it. We're getting glut. We're getting too much product. We're getting maybe bad product too, right? There you go. So give us your thoughts and feedback. We always love to know what you're talking about and thinking. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you're subscribing. See you soon.
Here's the best sci-fi on YouTube.
On a Sci-Fi Guy, of course.